In this video, I'll give you a full tutorial on how to use components in Figma. I'll give you version 1, which gives you options that show you different variants, and then I'll also show you the newer options available in components. You can see what I can do now is just drag out this instance of this component, and over here in the sidebar, I've got options that I can just select any of these different variants that I have up here, including whether or not they're as a hover state or not. And then I can change out the text, everything right over here, like, let's see, armchair designer or something like that, and then come over here and show or hide this icon and change it out if I want to like this armchair. All of this is available in Figma, and it makes designing and templating out pages super easy. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. As we build out these components, we're going to do it in two basic stages. First of all, I'll show you version 1 of components. This is how they've been in Figma for quite a while. And then secondly, I'll show you version 2, which came out in 2022, and add some additional elements to it, allowing us to pass in props and reduce the amount of components we have to create. Now, the whole point in adding components is it makes it quicker to template out a page because you can just select pre-built components and then customize them on each instance. So if that doesn't make sense, I think it will by the end of this video. So let's go ahead and start. We're just going to create some button components, and I'm going to start with a frame. So I can click up here or hit the F and then go ahead and drag this out. Now this button itself, let's zoom in just a touch. This button itself is going to have text inside of it. So maybe let's do this first. Let's hit Shift A, or you can right click and click Add Auto Layout. This will allow it to be dynamic and adjust, and basically makes it like a flex box container. I'm going to come over here and make sure that everything is always in the center. So again, if you're thinking web development terms, this would be Align Item Center and Justify Content Center. And then we'll also adjust the padding. So left and right, we'll do something more like 35 maybe, and up and down something like 15. All right, so with that set, let's go ahead and just customize what this looks like. So I'm going to add a color. Let me come down here. We'll have maybe like a green color for this one. And let's add a border radius too. We'll do something like 50 to make sure it's a pill shape. And then I'm going to click the text tool and add text in the middle. And you can see how it just dynamically adjusts like a flex parent container. And I'll say like button text or something. You know what? I don't love this green, so let's change this up too. Let me come down here and maybe I'll just choose this blue right here. All right, cool. So I got this basic button set created. Let's go ahead and click it, and then I will hold down the Option key and drag out another copy of it. So these are both just separate frames. Let's call this, let's just change around a couple of these styles. So let me get rid of this, and I'll add a stroke instead. And let's choose that same blue color, and maybe we'll set it to something like 4. And this will basically be like a secondary button type. Now I can repeat this process again, maybe grabbing both of these and dragging them out, and maybe I'll just change up the color in both of these. With anything selected, you can see your selected colors down below here, and I could select another one, like let's say we had some purple options as well. So we could have this like primary, secondary, accent, and secondary accent or something like that. So we've got 4 different options now that we've created, and you could just copy these throughout your design, but wouldn't it be nice if you could have different options and decide with each button basically how they would look without having to copy and paste these all throughout your document. Then if you wanted to update something, you could just update a main component and it would update all throughout your entire document. If you've done any work for any client or even just for yourself, you know that things change all the time. And so to be able to update like a main component and for everything else to just update along with you is another huge advantage of using components. So what I'm going to do is now that I've got all 4 of these button variants selected, I'm going to come up top here and just click Create Component Set. So I'll click that. You can see here that now these are all linked and there's a purple dotted border around it. Also over here in the layers panel, I now have a component icon and it says component 1. If I expand this, here are my different components I have inside of here. So I'm going to rename this. We'll rename it something like button. And then for each of these, what I can do is rename them here, but probably what's more important is for me to look over here in this properties section. You can see since I've got the entire component set selected, it's assigned a property and just named it property 1, and then assigned a value for that property, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and frame 4. Well, that's not super helpful for us. So what I want to do is rename this. So I'll double click in here and we'll just say something like type. All right, now what I can do is come in here, and for all these types, what I want to do is select them individually and update them. So in here, I want to say this is like primary like this, and we'll just leave it primary filled maybe. How about that? And then we'll do the same thing here. We'll call this secondary filled, and then we'll call this primary outline, and this will be secondary outline. All right, now the reason I've done it this way is because now what I can do is click on any of these and hold the Option key and drag it out. And now you see that I have a type property over here where I can just change it between these different states. So it'll just automatically grab those. And if I update anything over here, it'll update anywhere I've used this component. So every instance will update with it. So if I were to come in here and for some reason I wanted to change this to like a green color, you can see now this updates. And if I switch it back to filled, now it goes back to this one. So by having some kind of like reference point, it's really helpful to be able to update it and your entire design updates for you. Now, whenever you're looking at these instances, you'll have a new icon over here, right here. And if I hover, it says go to main component. So if I click this, it'll show it right here. Now, often if you're using components, you'll have like a page dedicated to them or like your style guide page or something like that. And so you're not usually on the same page as wherever the components are. So this is really helpful for quickly jumping to that. I can return to the instance now and come right back here. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to come in here and change this color back as well. So we'll go green and snap back to that blue one. All right, so here are 4 different variants, and this is what they're called in version 1 of these components. And again, you can see how I can quickly switch between them. Now, in addition to having a drop-down menu, you can also have different states, and if you set that value for all the states to either true or false and only those 2 options, it'll now act as a toggle switch, essentially being a Boolean between 2 different state options. So what I mean by that is we can have a hover state. So let's do that for all of these. So this will add quite a bit. So let's go ahead and grab all of these, and I'm going to grab all these right here and just hold down the Option key and drag and keep them inside this purple outline, which makes them additional variants. Now, it doesn't know what they're called, so it just leaves them like that. So let's go ahead and update these slightly, and then we'll change the styles or the names themselves. So I'm going to detach this instance and change this to something like 80%, and we'll do the same thing here. Detach this and change this to 80%. And then for this one, I'm going to do the same thing. We'll change it to 80%, and I'll add a fill color. And let's add that same purple, except in this case, I'll detach it again and change this to something like, I don't know, maybe 25%. That way the hover state gets some color, but it definitely doesn't look like the primary button. Same thing here. I'm going to come in here, do the same thing. So let's go ahead and what do we do? Detach this, change this to 80%, add a fill color, choose that same color, detach it once again, and come in here and change this to 25%. If you are curious how to just design in Figma as a whole, I have done a series recently, a single video where I went over all the basics of Figma, and then we built out an entire page, both for mobile and for desktop. So if you're interested in that, I'll add a link in the description and make sure to add something at the end of the video as well. So now you can see I now have 8 buttons, and they're different states essentially of this of these top 4 buttons. So I'm going to select either all of these, or probably the easiest thing is to come up here and click this. So I've got the component set actually selected. Now you'll see I've got a bunch of different options here, but what I want to do is not just have these all as in that single drop down. In other words, I don't want it to be like this, where I drag this out, and now I've got to choose between all of these, and then I have hover, primary outline, hover, secondary filled, so instead what I can do is say, hey, these should basically be, this one should be tied to this one should be tied to this one should be tied to this, and this one to this. So what I'm going to do instead is grab this, and we're going to rename this primary filled, and you can see here it says, hey, this is the exact same as this, so when you select it, we're not going to know which one to choose. So we'll change that in a second. I'm going to come over here, we'll do the same thing, secondary, not outline, secondary filled, and then here will be secondary outline, and this one over here will be secondary or primary outline. All right, so now with all of these, let's go ahead and click the component set again. What we want to do is add an additional property, and what I'm going to do is choose variant. This is version 1, and it allows you to have a new variant within this purple bordered outline. So I'm going to click here, and we're going to do something like hover. So whether or not it's hovered, and by default, I will set it to false. I'll hit create property. And now what I want to do is grab all of these, and I'm just going to update all of them at the same time to say true. Now my warning goes away. And now when I actually use this button itself, again, I can click in here and hit Option and drag it out. Another thing I can do is all of these components always live in the Assets panel, so I can drag it out this way. Or finally, one other thing I can do is hit Shift-I anywhere in the document, and this will give me access to components, plugins, and widgets. In this case, I'm going to grab my components and drag them out here. All right, now what I can do is choose between these different options. So primary outline, secondary filled. Let's see, maybe this one I spelled a little differently. I'm not sure why those are different. Secondary. Okay, so that's the problem. I just misspelled one of these. So let's change that first. Secondary filled, secondary outline. Here we go. All right, so let's change this to secondary filled. And now when I come back here, yeah, so I should just have 4 options. So primary filled, primary outline, and secondary filled. So I can select any of these. And now, because all of these hover states, this property, the value is set to either true or false, I can just toggle on and off a hover corresponding to whatever one also has secondary filled. Same thing here, switch over here, hover state or on or off. So that's great. And you can see how suddenly now we've got all 8 buttons as options, and I've got hover states for all of them. But this is where version 1 of components kind of falls flat. Once you start actually building something out for a site, these button lists can get forever long. You can have ones with icons or one without icons or ones with different kind of icons. And so suddenly you can have 40 or 50 or 60 buttons just for a basic site. So this is where the second version of buttons came in 2022. And that's kind of the core focus of what I want to show you in the last half of the video. Now, if you're used to working with templating languages, basically what they've added is the ability to have props. Props mean that you can just keep the same set, but suddenly get a bunch of different varieties from them by passing in props. And you've got 3 different options. So if I come over here and let's come back to our layers panel and select the component set itself, and I come over here and click properties and add a new one, you see now I have 3 different options. I have Boolean, instance swap, and text. Now I think text is the easiest, so let's start with that. I'm going to click and then we're going to give it a name. So I'll call this button text. And then the default value I'll just say is sample CTA or something like that. And then I'll hit create property. And now what I need to do is, since I've got this set, I haven't actually assigned it to anything yet. It's just on the component set. Now I need to tell the component set, hey, what prop should this be attached to? And I really only have one thing, and that's the actual text itself in here. So what I can do is select this one and then come over here and hold shift and select that one, shift and hold that one. So I can do all these like this, or a quicker way, if I click any one of these and make sure I've selected the actual thing I want to change out, the text itself, I've got this target icon that says select all 8 matching layers. So I'll click that and now all of them are selected for me. And I'm going to come over here and you're going to see I've got a couple different options. The one I'm interested in is this one that says content. This content now has a new icon over here called apply text property. Now notice there is one under layer. We're going to look at that in a second, but don't click on that. That says apply Boolean property. What we're interested in is the text prop. So let's click this and now we can either create a new one if we hadn't yet, but since we already created it on the component set, we can just select the one we created. If I click in here, a couple of things are going to happen. Number one, you see now this is attached to that prop. Number two, because I set a default value of sample CTA, all of these change to sample CTA. And now if I go ahead and use this, and I'll just make an instance here, I now have a new property down here, and I can fill this in saying like hi or whatever. And now this particular instance updates to that. Now, I can actually do this without creating this text prop. I can just double click in any instance and change this to like hello or something like that. And even if I were to come over here and update this to say hi or whatever else, notice how now that they're all attached, they'll actually all update automatically when I update this text, which is another cool little feature. It doesn't update this because I already made customizations. If, on the other hand, if I can make this not confusing, if I haven't made customizations on any particular instance, and I do change the main component here to say something like hi, it will actually update all those instances all throughout the document. But in other words, I don't have to have this text prop. I can just double click in here and change it. But the advantage of having the prop is now everything about this button is in one place. So you're not double clicking here and changing stuff over here. Everything that controls this button is in one little panel. All All right, so that's the first prop you can pass in. It's just basically text. And you can attach that and have as many as you want attached to any text inside of a component. So imagine if you had a card that had like a heading and had other stuff, you could have each of those be their own text prop and basically pass in whenever you call an instance of that component, whatever text you want to that particular prop. All right, so that's the easiest one to understand. I think the next one we'll do is the Boolean property. I think that's the next easiest. Now, we kind of already had Booleans here when it came to the component set, see true and false. However, this wasn't like whether things were visible, it's just different states. So if you're creating different states, you're going to create variants like we did at the beginning of the video. What we're wanting to do is actually create whether or not things are visible in the button. And normally what you'd have to do is, like, let's say we had icons, that sometimes these things would have icons associated with them and sometimes they would not. So maybe they had like a little send icon or an airplane icon or something like that. I'd have to literally double all these components and now add another variant for each of them so that each of them would then either have an icon or it wouldn't. So then I would have gone from 8 to now 16. This is where version 2 really starts to shine. So what I'm going to do is come up here and click here and come over to my plugins and choose a plugin that I've already created or downloaded rather from the community called Phosphor Icons, and I'll run this. Now this will pull up here. Let's just grab some random icons. Let's say like, I don't know, pull this out here. Sure, photos, an armchair, an alien head, that'll work. All right, so we'll grab all of these and let's kind of clean them up a bit and space them out. Distribute vertical spacing, that'll work. I'm going to come over here and instead of creating this as a set, I'm just going to make these multiple components. So they'll each be a component, and that's important because I actually want to be able to select these within my button. Now what I'll do is grab this one and hold down the Option key because I don't want to actually move this and put it inside of here. I just want an instance of this component. So I'm going to drag this over here and let's go ahead and make, let's see, can I close all these down? Here, let's grab the component set. This is going to be need to be a lot bigger, so we'll do that. I'm going to do the same thing for each of these. I'll just drag these in like this and like this, and I'm going to finish this up and be right back with you. All right, there we go. I'm going to distribute these a little more evenly so that they're spaced out better. And then next, let's go ahead and I'm going to update the color of each of these. So I'm going to grab the actual frame, come down here to the selected colors, and let's update this to that white as well for this one. And we'll do the same thing over here. Again, selected colors. I'll change this to the white. Now we've just done those on 2 of those, but I can actually select them all because they all have that same property or that same layer by clicking this select all 8 matching layers. And since I want them to all be that color, I'll just come in here and select them and they all change. Okay, so now I've got options that all have icons. Now, like I said, traditionally in version 1 of these components, you'd have to duplicate all of these, have some with icons and some without icons, and name each of those like one with icon, one without icon. No longer, because now we can basically pass this in as a Boolean prop. Basically show this or don't show this. So we're going to select this on the component level, and just like we added the text prop that we passed in, what we can do is come to the actual button itself, the whole component set, and I can come over here and click Properties and click Boolean right here. However, I can also do it from the child. So if I click this, again, click all 8 layers to match them. Now, down here in the Layers panel, this is where you'll always find the Boolean property, whether or not the layer is visible. And that makes sense because you can like hide or show it right here. What we're going to do is basically select that exact same thing through a Boolean property. So I'm going to click this, and we're going to create this for the whole component set, having selected all the children, all the variants in that component set, and then I'll say something like show icon. By default, I'll set this to true and click create property. Now what I've done is you see it's attached to that prop, and when I invoke this on an instance, so over here, I've got another option. And basically I can just show or hide it automatically and the whole thing will adjust. Because I set this up as an auto layout too, all the spacing and padding and all that just dynamically adjusts, which is great. All right, so this is how you use Boolean components. Unlike a Boolean like here with hover, it's not state, it's whether something is visible. So it's visible or it's not visible. All right, now there's one final prop you can pass in, and that one basically allows you to select different instances for the same section of whatever you're building out, the same section of the component. So maybe you'll have like an image on some cards if you're building out a component card, and sometimes you want to switch out that image based on whatever the card is being used for in your design. So what I'm going to do is select this, and I can select here and grab all those again. And now you'll see I have another icon right here, and you see it says Apply Instance Swap Property. So I can click this, or you know what, maybe let's go back to how we did it originally. You can also create the component set, click plus properties, create an instance swap, and we'll call this something like icon type, and then pick instance here. It's asking basically what thing should I be choosing from. And I'm just going to leave it at that, and maybe set it at the default of this arrow square. So this will be the default value, and click create property. Now I still haven't actually attached this to anything. I've just said on the component set itself, I want to be able to pass in a prop. So now what I need to do is do the same thing. Come in here and click all these, and now go and apply it here, which is why I think it's easier to create these from the children, because you can just do it at the start and create it right away and then just apply it right away. Now in this case, I just created it on the whole component set, so I'll just click icon type. Now, what's the magic of this? Well, now rather than having all of these as another 8 options for all of these, and then I also have some without them, suddenly that would be like 32 buttons, I guess 40 buttons technically. Now I've got 8. And look at all the variants I have available to me. I can show or hide the icon, and now I've got another drop down here for instance swapping. And I can select any of these local components, and it just swaps in automatically. All right, so this is an overview of components. This is kind of an advanced topic in Figma, but if you can get your mind wrapped around it, and I think as a web developer you have a leg up because you're used to passing in props to things, it really does open up design and make it way easier to kind of build out a whole design structure without creating 5,000 buttons or cards or whatever else you might need. So again, version 1 basically allows us to create different variants, but they have to actually all be visible inside of here, inside of this purple dotted line. And then you can select them either from the drop-down menu. So again, let me create an instance. So either from a drop-down menu, or if they're all set to true or false, whatever it is, whether it's a hover state or whatever else you might have, you can switch it with a little toggle here. So this is version 1. Version 2 then adds additional props, and these are things you can pass in that you don't have to create separate variants for. They would be things like changing the text here to something like open page or something like that. And now this instance changes that. It keeps everything about whatever the instance is all in one place. I can show or hide the icon. I can come over here and add like this aperture icon. It looks like I need to update the way I styled that. But very quickly, in one little area, you have access to everything about the particular component. And again, with version 2, you don't have to create 5,000 to get access to a bunch of different props that you can pass in. And finally, once again, you're not limited to just having one of each of these. You can have multiple things that are Boolean and multiple things that are text props on any particular component. And then just for each of them, you'll select what you want in the sidebar, and they'll all be visible right here. Well, I hope that was a huge help and gave you kind of a framework to wrap your mind around when it came to thinking about components in Figma. Hey, well, thanks so much for watching. I hope this was a huge help. I will catch you in the next one. Happy coding.